They say language is just a tool, a way to communicate, to name, to express. But if that were true, why does it feel like some things only exist once they're said, and others disappear the moment you try to explain them? They say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words build laws. Words write borders. Words define who counts and who doesn't. So let's ask, is language a bridge or a boundary? A mirror or a weapon? A map or the walls we build on it? Because if words shape what's real, who decides which words survive? You speak, you write, you listen, you think. But have you ever stopped to ask, where did these words come from? Who designed their meanings? A child learns right and wrong before understanding either. A woman is called hysterical, and history forgets the root, hystera, uterus. Objects get labelled masculine or feminine, and that seeps into how we perceive the world. Semiotician Charles Sanders Peirce clarified, meaning isn't in the word alone, it's in the sign, the context, the gesture. Language isn't just symbols, it's the silent tone, the gesture, the omission. Linguist Ferdinand de Saussure taught us, language isn't a label, it's a system. Tree doesn't grow from the thing, it grows from agreement, from power. Words don't reflect reality, they organize it. So maybe the real question isn't, what do you mean? Maybe it's, what meanings were you allowed to choose from? In ancient traditions, language was sacred. Egyptian gods spoke the world into being. In Genesis, let there be light. But what happens when language stops being creation and becomes control? Claude Lévi-Strauss believed myth wasn't lie, but structure. Structure to make sense. But structure demands silence. Colonialism thrived not on guns alone, but on language. Dictionaries, maps, translation guides. Entire cultures renamed, reclassified, rewritten, until their tongues forgot their own stories. As linguist Ngugi wa Thiong'o writes, language carries culture and culture carries memory. To silence a language is to sever the roots of existence. Language gives you power, but only if you speak it correctly. If your accent doesn't raise laughter, if you avoid ain't, bruh, or ox, unless someone else profits from it. Lélia Gonzalez named Português, the Portuguese of favelas, terreiros, kitchens, a language of survival, invention, resistance, but labelled broken, inferior. Let's be clear, grammar is not neutral, accent is not neutral. Professional, civilized, educated, all decisions that reflect power. Mock someone's speech and you mock their history, their sacrifices, their exclusion. But language isn't just power in the now, it's also the trace of where we've been. Every mark we leave, every dance, every tattoo, every silence held in a funeral is a form of language that remembers. Walter Benjamin called history a storm blowing from paradise and said our backs are turned to the future. We move forward, but we only see what's been wrecked. Language, then, is how we name the wreckage and how we refuse to forget it. When an elder sings an old lullaby, when a protester paints a name on a wall, when a sculptor carves memory into stone, that's not nostalgia, that's resistance. That's language preserving what time tries to erase. Historian Carlo Ginzburg once traced how a 15th century peasant's gestures revealed beliefs banned by church and state. No book, no testimony, just gesture, a hidden code of survival. Because when the powerful write history, the oppressed write in other ways, through rhythm, costume, food, ritual, graffiti, silence. Raymond Williams called culture a whole way of life, not elite, not decorative, but living language, etched into dance floors, kitchen tables, mourning rituals, memes. Think of how enslaved peoples braided seeds into their hair before crossing the Atlantic, not just for survival, but for memory. Each braid a map, a story, a future planted in the present. In this sense, language is not only what we speak, it's how we remember ourselves across generations. And in forgetting, something breaks. Because when a people lose their language, they don't just lose words, They lose ancestors, directions, warnings, possibilities. So the question is, what stories do you carry that haven't yet been told? What languages are you still trying to recover? Because history doesn't live in dates, it lives in gestures, in how your grandmother set the table, in how a community gathers to mourn, in how you refuse to speak the way the system demands. And maybe, the most dangerous thing about language is that it never stays in the past. Now pause. Think of the last time you couldn't find words, not because you forgot them, but because they didn't exist. There are feelings that don't translate, identities that don't fit any box, traumas too deep for grammar's cracks. Is that silence or erasure? When we say, "There's no word for this in English," we name a gap, a blind spot, a violence. Because what you can't say, you can't defend. What you can't name, you can't claim. What you can't imagine, you can't become. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio shows us that language shapes memory, thought, emotion. Without words, feelings remain amorphous, dangling outside consciousness. But here's the thing. Language isn't static. It mutates, it rebels. Slang reclaims. Poetry multiplies possibility. Memes explode meaning and stitch it anew. Queer communities reforge pronouns. Diasporas braid tongues. Activists re-weaponize slogans. Every day, language resists. So language resistance isn't just saying what's allowed. It's saying what was never supposed to be spoken. Maybe freedom begins with syntax, with saying, "I am," even when the world says you're not. But beware. Not every word is liberation. Some are camouflage. Diversity, inclusion, tolerance. They sound like progress, but often lock the structure in place. Language can be costume, a polished script to sanitize power, neutral, reasonable. When words become air, when literally loses meaning, and we regret the inconvenience means someone got hurt, then language becomes noise. So ask, what does it mean to speak clearly, in a world profiting from confusion? To mean something when meaning is diluted. Think of the algorithm. It doesn't care what you believe, only what you click. It feeds you language designed to hook, provoke, manipulate. You think you choose your words, but what if they've been choosing you? This video isn't about answers. It's about noticing. Because what we call natural is often scripted. Even silence has a grammar. Language is everywhere, and that's why we stop seeing it. But when you really pause, you start to hear it again. In insults masquerading as jokes, in praise wrapped in threats, in the voice you use depending on the room. Language is how we survive, but also how we shrink, how we become what others expect, or begin to break free. So ask, what have you never been able to say, and why? What word do you wish existed, and what would it change? Because once you start asking, you begin remembering, rebuilding, reclaiming. This isn't just about speech, this is about power, memory, possibility. Every word you use is a choice, every silence, a seed of meaning waiting. Let's stop pretending language is neutral. Let's stop letting the loudest voice write the story. Because in the end, language is not just what you say. It's what you're allowed to say, what you're afraid to say, what you're still learning to say. Maybe the most radical thing you can do is say it anyway. We want to talk about economy, affection, injustice, invention, but we can't say anything without first seeing that saying is already doing. Next up, we'll ask, can freedom exist outside the concept? This channel is a space where curiosity becomes clarity, and clarity becomes confrontation. We don't offer comfort, we offer language. Because once you can name what shapes you, you can begin to reshape yourself.